Welcome back, friends. So in the previous lessons, we started to learn conditional statements. We saw, first of all, that the most basic one, the if-else statement, works well. Then we saw ternary operators, which we prefer to use if our conditions are fairly simple. But I did promise you that there is another conditional. I mentioned that at the last lecture. Remember what it is? Yeah, it's called the switch case statement. So it's basically like a huge if-else statement where we have multiple else-if blocks. So we can employ perhaps an easier to understand syntax, okay? And in point of fact, I think it's just a better syntax. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but basically, it's important to know the switch statement. So we'll start with an example to see how that works. All right, so let's define a variable here first and say var day. And I'm not going to assign a variable to this variable first, so now we can just use a switch statement. So let's start to write our switch statement. So we say switch, and in here between these parentheses, we put what we want to ask and what we basically want to evaluate. Okay, and this will make a lot of sense when you see the entire switch statement. So for now, let's just write the day here, and you'll then understand why it works like this. Okay, so we switch the day. Basically, we're going to evaluate the day variable. And then we can add a couple of case blocks. So we say case. And then here we can say, for example, Saturday. Then colon. And then in the next line, we'll say what we want to have happen. So in this case, I want to console log that I like Saturday. So again, if the day is equal to Saturday, then this code here will be executed. All right, you follow? Cool. So let's add a couple more. So case Monday, I say console.log, I do not like Monday. All right, so this is the basic functionality of the switch statement. You get it. So let's add one more, and I'll say case Friday. And then again, our console.log, let's say, I really like Friday. All right, so what we're doing here is, again, we're comparing the day to each of these different cases. So if the day is Saturday, then do this. If the day is Monday, then do this. If the day is Friday, well, do this. Now, if none of these here applies, then we can add a default. Okay, so all we have to do is say default and then define what happens in that case. So in this case, I'll say that console.log, I do not know the day. Okay, so if none of these apply, so these are basically like the else if and the if else statement. So in an if else statement, this would be if day equals Saturday, then do this, right? Else if Monday, then do this. Else if Friday, then do this. And then else do this, right? Okay, so this default right here is basically our last else in an if-else statement. All right, so just to prove a point, let's try it out. So I say day equal to Monday. And here there's an important point which I want to make here, which you got to be careful when you use switch case statements. Actually, this is kind of my one pet peeve about the switch case statements. So it's a break statement. So what we've got to do here is to add a break statement. All right, so just follow along. So here we've got to say break because otherwise it will keep evaluating these next cases. Okay, so even if the day is Monday, it will keep evaluating these other cases because it'll be basically looking at them and, yeah, it sees it as true. Yeah, they're true. Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. So it's not going to just evaluate the cases. It's also going to execute these codes as well, even if they are not true. So what I mean to say is if we do not use break, then after the first case, it evaluates as true, then it executes that case, and then the rest of the cases as well. So let's see what I mean in console. All right, so here I said day is Monday. So JavaScript starts to evaluate the cases. The first case is not true. The day is not Saturday. So it goes to the next case. And yeah, here it is true because our day is Monday, right? So what we expect here to see, just as console log in our console, but if we don't use break here, we're going to see all these console logs. So let's go back to our console and refresh. And here, as I said, we see all three console logs. The one which is evaluating the first true and then the rest of the codes that come after the first true case. Okay, so let's return to our code. Yeah, and obviously this is not something that we want to have happen. So we've got to use that break keyword at the end of this block that we want to execute. So break, and here, break also. Now let's go to our console and see what happens. So I'll refresh the page, and yep, sure enough, this is the result that we expected, right? All right, great. Now, if you want to, you can test other cases as well, but I'm going to return to the code. Here, we can use return instead of break statements. I'll show you how. So if there is a return statement, then we don't have to use the break statement. Okay, so this is here again, a simple way of replacing a huge if-else statement. And actually, in the background, there's code something like if day triple equals to Monday. Okay, so now let's turn an if-else statement that we created before into a switch case statement. Okay, so to do that, I'll go here and now I'll copy this code block and paste it down here. So now let's comment out this again. Okay, now let's turn this into a switch case statement. But as you can see, here there is a less than operator, which is different than a triple equal operator. So normally we can't do this with a switch case statement. So this first switch case that I showed you here basically simply switches a variable and compares all of these cases to that variable with triple equal. But here we have this number range, so it works slightly differently. So it's actually a great thing to learn, and well, we can do it here, and it'll be a great exercise for you. So to be able to do that, I'm going to show you a little trick. No, not that kind of trick. Just turn it into a switch statement. So in order to turn it into a switch statement, in this case, what we want to switch is true. Okay, so we basically want to compare each of the expressions below that we're going to put to true. And this is a trick to simply make the switch work as an if-else statement with ranges. But of course, we'll first create our variable. So say var grade and 38. So our first case will be case grade less than 40. And in that case, console log this sentence to the console. And then, of course, we need to write our break. And actually, in the background, our switch statement will look at this. True, triple equal, and then in parentheses, this statement grade less than 40. Okay, then the next case is, let's actually go ahead and copy it because we already know how it works at this point. And then log this in here to the console. And then the break statement. And then our next and final case, I'll say default, and we want to console log this statement again. So I copy and paste it in here as well. Okay. So we turned this into the switch statement. So now we have all these conditions here, basically not as strings as we had before. And actually, this first one here is the more usual case of using the switch statement. So you see this, you see how it works. So where we have like a string that we want to compare with some variable, and like I said, here in the first example, in the background, we actually say if day triple equals Saturday. And in the second example in the background, we'll say if true triple equal to this statement, then if this result is true, then execute this code block. Okay, now let's save all this and go to console. So here we see you cannot go to class. Okay, again, if you want, you can test some other cases as well. But in this lesson, we've just learned the switch case statement and how and when to use it. So we'll just pause right here and we'll continue in the next section.